Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Lollipop and today I'm unbelievably excited because we are finally going to be making an updated version of my most popular video, which is of course a comparison of the entire lineup of Trek Marlin bikes. Now in the past I compared all of the 2021 Trek Marlins with one another, but now that all of the 2022 Marlins have been officially released, it's time to check out those changes and compare all the new parts among all 5 bikes. Hopefully this video gives you a very in-depth yet clear review that helps you figure out which bike is the best for you, and if it does, I'd greatly appreciate you liking this video and subscribing to my channel, since I love making videos like these and will continue to make more. Now, as always, I will be completing these large tables at the end of the video to show all of those changes in one place, and at the end I will also talk about which riding style and type of rider each bike is best suited for, and then also explain my overall favorite choice out of the 5. I will of course be comparing all of the different components with one another, like the suspension forks, the brakes, the drivetrains, and all of the drivetrain components like the shifters and the cassettes, to give you a comparison that has all the details. So with that, let's move on to a quick background. The Trek Marlin lineup is intended to be Trek's entry-level mountain biking lineup, although now it does include some higher-end models that are much more expensive and pretty trail-ready. These bikes can be used for beginner, intermediate, and even more difficult trails depending on the model, but they can also all be used as commuter bikes since they have mounting points for a rear rack, as well as for a kickstand. Now, there are usually some women-specific Marlins available for certain bikes like the Marlin 5 and 6, but currently I am not seeing any 2022 women's Marlins. Nonetheless, if we do see any in the future, the only differences they will likely have are the colors and a different women-specific seat. Thus, for this video, I will focus on the men's versions of the bikes when I show images and compare them, just to make it easier to understand. Alright, so now let's start off the comparison by talking about all the components that these bikes share with one another. So every single 2022 Trek Marlin bike uses the exact same frame, seat post, seat, stem, handlebar, pedals, front hub, and the rear hub with the exception of the Marlin 7 and 8, which actually use a higher quality hub. I'm not going to focus too much on these components since they are shared among all the bikes, but I will go ahead and show you the frame geometry on the screen right now. So these frames have not been updated since 2021, so the Marlins are still cross-country focused mountain bikes designed for efficiency over riding downhill or handling very rocky terrain. However, they are still pretty capable, and they of course use internal cable routing to protect cables, and they use Trek's Alpha Silver aluminum, which is not as high quality, but it is still lightweight and durable. They also all use 29-inch diameter wheels in most frame sizes. And speaking of sizes, it's also worth mentioning that Trek does offer all of the Marlins in 7 different sizes from extra small to extra large, which includes a medium-large size between the medium and large for riders who are around 5'8" to 5'10" inches. The 2022 Marlin 5 and Marlin 8 are the only bikes that come with an extra small size, and these bikes use 26-inch diameter wheels instead to make them more comfortable. All bikes in sizes small and below also have a curved top tube to make it easier to get on and off of the bike, and these small and extra small frame sizes use 27.5-inch diameter wheels for better comfort. But with the similarities and background info done, let's finally cover all of those differences, starting with the prices. So before I discuss this, these prices are definitely subject to change in the future, but they're correct at the time of me making this video. However, if anything does change, I will add updates in the pinned comment down below. Okay, so according to Trek's website in the United States and in Great Britain, the 2022 Marlin 4 is going to be priced at $530 to $560 or 450 pounds. The Marlin 5 then increases $100 more to $670 or 525 pounds. Then the 6 increases another $100 to $780 or 625 pounds, and the Marlin 7 increases $200 more to $950 or 800 pounds. And lastly, the Marlin 8 increases $250 more to $1,200 or 900 pounds. But now let's check out what these increases in price get you, starting with the suspension fork. So each bike uses a fork with 100 millimeters of suspension travel in most sizes, but 80 millimeters of travel in the extra small size to make it more comfortable for shorter riders. All the forks also use quick release axles to make it easier to remove the front wheel off of the bike. The Marlin 4 uses the SR Suntour XCE 28 fork, which has a coil spring and 28mm diameter wide upper stanchions, while the Marlin 5 goes to the SR Suntour XCM 30 fork, which also has a coil spring, but it has wider 30mm wide stanchions for added stiffness and strength, as well as a hydraulic lockout, which is essentially a knob that you can manually turn on the fork to make it fully rigid, which is helpful because it lets you go faster in flat areas or while going uphill, as you do not lose any pedaling efficiency to the suspension fork. The Marlin 6 actually uses a very similar fork to the Marlin 5, since it is the SR Suntour XCT30 instead of the XCM30. The XCM on the Marlin 5 actually has a better damper, so the fork on the 6 is interestingly not as good, but it isn't too much worse. The Marlin 7 then moves to the RockShox Judy coil spring fork, which also has 30mm wide stanchions and a hydraulic lockout, but it does have better damping and construction overall, and thus is more reliable. And finally, the Marlin 8 makes a significant upgrade to the RockShox Judy Silver Air fork, which once again has 30mm wide stanchions and a lockout, but it has a rebound adjustment knob so you can adjust how quickly the fork bounces back from a hit. The air fork also just means that it is much lighter in weight and more adjustable for your specific weight, and it is thus a great upgrade to see on a Marlin. For the next component, I'll talk about the wheels, starting with the rims. So most of the Marlins actually use the same rim, which is the Bontrager Connection Alloy rim, which uses Schrader valves. Then the Marlin 7 and 8 for 2022 upgrade to the Bontrager Covey rims, which are actually tubeless ready and use Presta valves. The Covey rims are better because they allow you to set up your bike tubeless more easily, as long as you have the tubeless ready tires. They are also a bit wider for added strength. And on that note, let's talk about the tires. Now, all the Marlins besides the 8 use the exact same Bontrager XR2 comp tires, which have a wire bead, are 30 TPI, and 2.2 inches wide in the front and the rear. These are cross-country tires and they are not tubeless ready, so if you do want to set up your bike tubeless, you would need to purchase tubeless ready tires. However, the Marlin 8 switches it up to the Maxxis brand Ardent race tires, which are tubeless ready. These tires are also 60 TPI, so they are lighter in weight and more flexible over rougher terrain. Now the sizes on these tires are a bit different, as the 26-inch wheel diameter bike uses 2.4-inch wide tires in the front and the rear, while the 27.5 and 29er versions of this bike use a 2.35-inch wide tire only in the front and a 2.2-inch wide tire in the rear. This allows the Marlin 8 to have a more aggressive front tire for handling rougher terrain, while having a thinner, faster rolling tire in the rear for more speed. Overall, after looking at the wheel sets, we can see that the Marlin 8 is the only bike that can be converted to a tubeless setup with just sealant, tubeless valves, and a tubeless ready rim strip, making it way more trail ready than the other options. The tires on the Marlin 8 are also more aggressive for better traction. And next, we'll talk about a smaller component, which are the grips. So real quick, the Marlin 4, 5, and 6 all use the Bontrager XR Endurance Comp grips, which are ergonomic and have an area for your palm to rest on, while the 7 and 8 go to the XR Trail Comp grips, which are just cylindrical for better control on trails. But going back to some crucial components, let's talk about the brakes. So each Marlin uses a 160mm diameter brake rotor for the rear brakes, and most of them use 160mm brake rotors in the front as well, except for the Marlin 7 and the Marlin 8 in sizes large and above, which actually have a 180mm wide rotor for increased stopping power. But for the actual brakes, the Marlin 4 uses mechanical disc brakes from Tektro, while the Marlin 5 and 6 upgrade to the Tektro hydraulic disc brakes. Then the Marlin 7 and 8 go to the Shimano MT200 hydraulic disc brakes, which are pretty similar to the Tektro hydraulics, but they just have better construction and a little better stopping power. Overall, the hydraulic brakes are much better than the mechanical brakes because they have better stopping power, work well in all weather conditions, and they require less maintenance. And now let's discuss the final component difference among these 5 bikes, which is the drivetrain. I'll start with an overview on all of the drivetrains and then dive into each component to really highlight those differences. So the Marlin 4 uses a mainly Shimano tourney drivetrain with 3 gears in the front and 7 in the back for a total of 21 different speeds. The tourney is Shimano's lowest end group set for drivetrains, but it works well enough for commuting and light trail riding. Then the Marlin 5 upgrades to the Shimano Altus 2x8 drivetrain, so 2 gears in the front and 8 in the back for a total of 16 speeds. This group set is one step above the tourney, but it is noticeably smoother and quicker. Also, having less gears means less maintenance and less problems with gears in general, so that is definitely preferred. Next, the Marlin 6 and 7 now both have the same 1x10 drivetrain, which is the Shimano Dior. Now, this is several steps above the Altus, so it is much faster, smoother, and more reliable, and it's also less prone to malfunctioning. And then finally, we have the Marlin 8, which has the entry-level drivetrain from SRAM's mountain biking lineup, which is the SRAM SX Eagle 1x12. But now let's get into the drivetrain components, starting with the shifters. So the Marlin 4 uses Shimano Altus shifters, but they have a one-piece shifter and brake lever design. The Marlin 5 upgrades to the Shimano Altus M315 shifters, which are not connected to the brake levers, which makes them easier to replace and smaller to take up less space on the handlebar. They also respond better to shifts and are a bit quicker. Then the Marlin 6 and 7 both use the Shimano Dior M4100 shifters, which are more ergonomic and have better construction quality for quicker shifting. All of these Shimano shifters have the ability to shift up to 3 gears at a time when going to an easier gear for pedaling, so you can get up hills even if you do not see them quick enough to shift early on. And then the Marlin 8 goes to the SRAM SX Eagle shifter, which has a different feel since it is SRAM instead of Shimano, but the main difference is that the SRAM shifter allows you to shift up to 5 gears at a time when going to an easier gear, making it even better for going uphill. Next, we can go over the front derailleurs, which move the chain onto a different gear in the front crankset. This will be pretty quick because the Marlin 6, 7, and 8 do not have front derailleurs, as they only have one gear in the front, but the Marlin 4 uses the Shimano tourney front derailleur, while the Marlin 5 upgrades to the Shimano Altus derailleur, which is much smoother and much quicker. Then for the rear derailleurs that move the chain across the cassette, the Marlin 4 also uses a Shimano tourney, while the Marlin 5 of course goes to the Altus, which is once again more reliable because of the better construction, allowing it to also be slightly quicker and smoother. The Marlin 6 and 7 make a big upgrade to the Shimano Dior M5120 rear derailleur, which is much faster and has a clutch mechanism that adds tension onto the chain to prevent chain noise and malfunction. And finally, the Marlin 8 uses the SRAM SX Eagle rear derailleur, which honestly has been known to be pretty problematic since it is the lowest end derailleur SRAM offers. However, if it is set up correctly, it works very well, but it is just a bit more fragile than the Shimano Dior. And the SX does have a clutch as well. And now we can move on to the gears, starting with the front cranksets. So of course the Marlin 4 has 3 chainrings in the front crankset, which is a Shimano tourney level crank with 42 teeth on the largest gear, 34 in the middle, and 24 on the smallest. Then the Shimano Altus uses a 2 chainring crankset with 36 teeth on the larger ring and 22 on the smaller. Now the Marlin 6 and 7 actually use a different crankset, which is a Pro Wheel 30 tooth on the 6 and an FSA 28 tooth on the 7. And the Marlin 8 uses a 30 tooth SX Eagle crankset. I'll talk more about what all of these gears really mean on the trail after I cover the cassettes right now. So the Marlin 4 in the rear actually uses a freewheel with 14 teeth on the smallest cog and 28 teeth on the largest cog, while all the other bikes use cassettes. Freewheels are just cheaper to manufacture because of their lower quality parts, and they typically have a narrower gear range than cassettes. Then the 5 uses a Shimano 12 to 32 tooth cassette, which has 2 less teeth on the smallest cog and 4 more teeth on the largest cog. Having less teeth on the smallest cog means you will have a harder gear for going faster, while more teeth on the largest cog means you will have an easier gear for pedaling uphill. Then the 6 and 7 both use an 11 to 46 tooth Shimano Dior cassette, so a much wider range, which is necessary because you only have one gear in the front now. And then finally the Marlin 8 has the widest 11 to 50 tooth cassette. So pairing each of these cassettes with their respective cranksets, we actually see that the Marlin 8 has the easiest gear for pedaling uphill, with the Marlin 7 coming in as a close second, but the Marlin 4 and 5 have the hardest gears for pedaling the fastest. However, the added benefit of removing the front derailleur on the higher end Marlins, in my opinion, makes up for losing out on the highest end speeds, and especially on the trail while mountain biking, you typically do not need those high end speeds. And now that we've covered all of the drivetrains, we have to discuss the weight differences in each of these bikes, and luckily Trek does provide an average weight for each bike, and although the actual weight of your bike could be a little bit more or less, this should be a good estimate. So all of these bikes are weighed in a size medium with inner tubes installed, but the Marlin 4 weighs 30.82 pounds, while the Marlin 5 weighs almost the same at 30.8 pounds, but the Marlin 6 weighs more at 31.11 pounds. The Marlin 7 then cuts it down to 29.7 pounds, and lastly the Marlin 8 goes down to 29.1 pounds. But we did it! That's the entire comparison of the 2022 Trek Marlin lineup. I hope this video helped you out, and here are the completed tables. I'll show the drivetrain one in a separate table soon, but for now I'll talk about which bike is the best for a certain purpose. So in my opinion, the Marlin 4 is perfect as a commuter-only bike, or as a bike you want to take on gravel pads or on rougher roads or anything like that. If you're on a budget, it's also going to be good for mountain biking, but it won't be as confidence-inspiring and stable as the other Marlins. The Marlin 5, in my opinion, is the best all-around bike for commuting, trail riding, and whatever else, because it does have that lockout for efficiency, and it also has a good, reliable drivetrain that does not have too many speeds to complicate things, but not too little either. Then the Marlin 6 is really the entry-level trail-ready mountain bike with that amazing Shimano Dior drivetrain. It's going to handle the trail a lot better and be more reliable on rougher stuff. The Marlin 7 is then for people who want a bit more. It still has that great 1x10 drivetrain, but then upgrades the fork and the brakes a bit to make it more trail-oriented. And then now it also has tubeless ready rims, so you can just get the new tires and have a pretty solid trail bike that can handle most trails. But the Marlin 8 is of course the top of the line. It is the most expensive one, but it does have a 1x12 drivetrain, which is perfect for mountain biking. It has great tires and rims that you can set up tubeless and really have a bike that does not need to be upgraded. And of course, all of these bikes are still going to be great all-around bikes because of those kickstand and rack mounts, so they are still pretty versatile. And as promised, I will talk about which one is my personal favorite. So considering all of the components and the prices of each bike, this is still a very tough decision, but I think I'd go with the Marlin 6 personally. And that's because this year it has an amazing drivetrain and it's priced well. And although I would want the Marlin 7 or the 8, I personally think that the 6 has the best value for the money. That being said, if you do have the budget, the 7 and 8 are definitely a lot better, but I would rather get the 6 and have some fun riding around and eventually just upgrade to a full suspension bike or something like that. But that's it for this video, everyone. I hope all of you enjoyed, and remember to leave any questions or comments down below, and I'll try my best to answer them and add updates as well. But besides that, thank you all for watching, and remember to keep biking.